Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Immanuel Kant is usually viewed as liberal, even though actual political prescriptions of, say, Hobbes and Rousseau have distinctly illiberal features, insofar as they take their starting point as a state of nature, which humans are free and equal, and so argue that any limitation on this freedom and equality must be justified. The final relevant quote that needs to be read is...
But by the way, what you just read there and what I said is almost identical, you know that?
It's similar. It is similar, but except it's not.
Refutation?
Yeah, the refutation is that the fundamental, the necessary
a priori assumption.
Yeah, it's this idea that that's the most important thing. And so there are many thinkers. But there are many thinkers within the liberal tradition who didn't talk about social contract theories. Who didn't kind of deal with that sort of ideas.
Those 2 points.
Like, for example, someone like what's his name, Voltaire, for example. He never spoke about the social contract theory, but he's still a liberal thinker because he espouses its ideas.
In his book, Democracy in is that Voltaire? No, Democracy in America.
Okay.
Yeah. There is
by Voltaire?
No, not by Voltaire. This was written. Who wrote Democracy in America? It's written by.
Is it by a founding father or?
No, write it down.
Okay.
But there is. Voltaire does mention social contract, by the way. We can double check that. But going back to the point.
Yeah, but anyway, the other important thing is that liberalism is also a tradition of conflicting ideas. The ideas often conflict with each other.
We're not actually in disagreement.
Okay, but you need to give your audience that idea, because otherwise they're going to think that liberalism is just Locke. Because it is, because what you went on to do in your video is that you kind of gave your account of the social contract, and you used it to say, therefore, once there is a social contract, any law is valid. And then you said, except for, like, the state can't infringe on property rights. And this is explicitly something from Hobbes. From Locke. Because, for example, Rousseau would have a totally different idea of the purview of the social contract. And so, like, when you gave your viewers that idea, they're thinking, oh yeah, liberalism is only about property rights. Well, you did speak a little bit when you were talking about the social contract as well. So if you agree that you've given too monolithic a representation of liberalism, then that's one of the important things that I needed to refute you on.
You have to allow it to be.
Yeah. So that's one point that I've made. That's that one.
Is it my turn?
Yeah.
James, let's keep it pleasant, because otherwise, if we're just talking over each other, it's not going to work.
Well, okay, but I didn't try and interrupt you when you were talking, so okay, fine.
So here, I agree with a lot of what you said. What you read out there basically was amazing how it actually represents. If people rewind what I said and listen to what you said, they'll find that about 80% of what I said was what is within what you read, right? The state of nature and all that kind of. I mean, you're actually validating what I'm saying, right? You are. Now the point is that I made. And if you look back on the video footage, you'll hear me saying this again, is that the standard understanding of liberal theory is that you start with a state of nature, and then there's a transaction that's made, usually referred to as a social contract, and that gives legitimacy to the sovereign, right? That is what Rousseau said, that is what Locke said, that is what Thomas Hobbes said. Now, if you don't have that social contract, then the sovereign doesn't have legitimacy, doesn't have a mandate. The a priori assumption that you mentioned, I didn't disagree with that. Locke said that himself. He said that there's only one or two things, literally, that you can have a right to protect. One of them was property. So he had that a priori assumption himself, right? Which is the a priori assumption of freedom in the first instance. Now, the reason why I was making this point to you, and this is just to cut to the chase, because there's a lot of technicalities here and a lot of people will be lost, right? You agree and I agree that, liberalism is more than just John Locke and John Stuart Mill and Rousseau and all those names I mentioned. I use them as additional, as supplementary evidence. I can't stand here and start mentioning 30 or 40 names. It's impossible, right? It's not an essay I'm writing, it's a conversation I'm having. Okay, now that's point number one. Number two is, the point I'm making is that there's a similarity. This is my main argument, right? The reason why we had this discussion in the first place is to show you that the dominant ethic here in the West, which is liberalism, and social liberalism in particular, there is conceivable within the framework of social liberalism that you can have, situations whereby, for example, slavery can exist. You can have situation and legitimized through the social contract. You can have situation where, for example, the death penalty can be given in certain contexts. Treason laws can be put in place, which, by the way, I'm saying are, for all intents and purposes, the same kind of laws that you criticize regularly as a Western liberal. Not yourself, but maybe you. I don't watch your videos. I watch the ones that me and you are in only. Yeah. So no, I'm not. Right. So no. Yeah, it's just a review. But what I'm saying is, it's as conceivable through a liberal social contract understanding, a contractarian understanding, that those laws, which are like, for example, death penalty for non-allegiance to a state, even cutting hands off, amputation. I mean, it's not inconceivable that a liberal state can allow that within its paradigm. Just as it's not inconceivable, of course, within the Islamic state for the same thing to be allowed. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this to your attention is to let you know that what you have to offer me is basically nothing, right? When liberals and people from the West tell Muslims that you have to modernize, my argument to you is, for the sake of argument, let's say we're going to modernize, right? Let's go with it. Now, let's say become liberal and we completely change. And by the way, most of the Muslim countries are probably premised on or predicated on some kind of liberalism anyway, right? Even though they're dictatorships for the most part. But let's say for the sake of argument, we go with that model. My point is, what really is going to change? A dictator, or let's just say a sovereign, or a leader of some sort, if he ceded that power, he can decide to have Sharia law, right? Literally all the punitive laws of Sharia law within a liberal framework, and that can be legitimized through the social contract. That's my argument. So what I'm saying is, you basically have nothing to offer me, right? And you can't say on liberalism, this is my argument, secondary point, you can't have a sanctimony on liberalism. You can't say, well, cutting the hand of the thief is wrong. Or, for example, the punishment of death penalty is wrong. Because why? It's conceivable through your system as well. Okay. That's what it is. So my argument is, you have nothing to offer us, and what you're criticizing us of, in principle, is possible in a liberal state. That's my argument. And unless you can unlock those principles and say that contract theory doesn't exist, then that's going to be a checkmate and a final bottom line, really, I believe.
Okay. I'm glad that you tried to make that argument, okay? Yeah. So going back to just the one that we almost finished with before, kind of, as part of our agreement that liberalism is a broad tradition with often contradictory ideas between one liberal philosopher and another liberal philosopher, it is therefore invalid for you to have said, as you did in your video, that one of the fundamental pillars, one of the pillars of liberalism is what you represented of the social contract theory. Because for one thing, the social contract theory that you represented was just John Locke's. Like the social contract. Well, no, because Rousseau's social contract theory would be very different to what you represented. Because, for example, why? Because you said that one of the things that social contract theory couldn't be used to justify violating would be property rights, whereas Rousseau would totally disagree.
Okay, right.
And so I'm saying more. And so you need to.
That's a minor point.
It isn't. No, it's an important point, because people are going to come away with this idea of like, liberalism, it's so monolithic, it's so simple.
All right, so I think you've done a good job. We've shown the people that it's not monolithic.
Yeah,
we accept
exactly.
That liberalism is a broad tradition that spans for more than 300 years. Yeah. Or maybe even 300 years. So it's not monolithic. It has varying opinions within it, and often, like you said, contradictory ones. Yeah. But my point was this: is that
I'll get to your second
it's
point now.
conceivable within that framework to have these outcomes. I'm not saying that all liberals. I've never said this, James. I've never said that all liberal thinkers say this.
Okay.
I've said it's conceivable, principally within the framework, to envisage these outcomes. In other words, the outcomes where punitive laws, for example, the punitive laws of Islam, can be implemented in a liberal state through the mandate of the people, ceded to the sovereign master or the represented elected, and then they can actually do those things. So it's conceivable.
I'll get that. Yeah. Okay, cool.
My argument is one of conceivability.
Yes. Okay.
Potentiality.
And I'll agree with you that it is potentially possible. Okay, it's potentially possible for a democracy to turn into a dictatorship and start implementing, taking away freedom of speech, taking away freedom of religion, re-legalizing slavery. That's not impossible. Okay. However, this isn't an argument.
Democracy is a different ideology, by the way.
It can be, but I'm not representing this abstract, non-democratic liberal state. I don't know what that means. I'm representing
James, can we pause here for
modern.
A second?
Because we're going to be talking. We aren't going to be talking about a hypothetical, non-democratic liberal state.
No,
You want, I think, to show that kind of a Sharia state with a kind of Salafi understanding is not inferior to a modern.
I've never mentioned Salafism.
Okay, but you are a Salafi.
I've never mentioned Salafism.
Are you a Salafi?
I call myself a Hanbali. I'm Muslim.
Oh really? Okay, I didn't know that. So you're a Hanbali madhab follower.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so even under it's the same is true under a Hanbali madhab. Okay.
Now you've read about Hanbali madhab.
I know some certain things, like Muqtasar al-Khiraqi, for example.
You've read al-Khiraqi, yeah?
Not the whole thing, but I checked parts of it.
I can guarantee you, it's not translated into English.
It is translated into English. Yeah. Muqtasar al-Khiraqi. Yeah, I've got it here. Do you want to see it?
Yes, please show me.
Okay, sure. It's not the whole thing.
Khiraqi's thing is this.
Yeah, it's not the whole thing. It's just a section of it.
Okay, let me tell you something.
I've got a section of the Khiraqi.
Before you continue, Ibn Qudama, he wrote a book called Al-Mughni, yeah?
Yeah.
Do you know who Ibn Qudama was?
I can't remember.
If you're a Hanbali, if you know about Hanbalism, you need to know about Ibn Qudama, alright? Ibn Qudama is one of the major scholars of the Hanbali madhab.
Yeah, but Khiraqi came before that, though.
Yes.
Yes, so this is more fundamental.
Let me explain
This directly translates Hanbal's opinions.
That's not Al-Khiraqi.
Yeah, it is. It will be.
It can't be Al-Khiraqi.
Yeah, no, I printed out a few pages of it to show the point that I wanted to make. I'll show you them.
You might have a few extracts that are translated, but the whole Khiraqi is definitely not translated into English. I can tell you that from
I think there's some PhD students that has done this.
I looked at it myself. I went to the library and I wanted to see.
Well, it might not be. It might. Okay, no, but this is
Tell
a
me where it's translated. I'd like to know.
Okay, I'm getting it now.
Al-Mughni is not even. I don't even know if Mughni is translated. If anyone knows if Mughni is translated. Al-Mughni is, by the way, an explanation of Al-Khiraqi. Yeah.
Okay.
So Ibn Qudama did. Al-Mughni is okay. It's not. This is not Al-Khiraqi, bro.
This is part of it. So this is the Muqtasar al-Khiraqi, a 10th century work of Islamic jurisprudence, translated by Khalid Anas, PhD, New York University, 1992.
Did you translate all of it?
No, well, I only printed out a bit of it. I printed off the chapter of jihad.
Oh, jihad only.
Yeah, because it's important. It's important, but yes.
If they got a PhD guy from New York that done it, that's interesting. I'll look into it. But Al-Khiraqi's book is not.
Let's not get into the Hanbali madhab. Let's not get down there. So because
but I'm telling
you, the point
you haven't touched Al-Khiraqi.
What do you mean I haven't touched it?
No, that's an English translation. I'm telling you.
So it must be wrong, right?
No. Al-Khiraqi is such a big book that in order to cover that, you need a lifetime. Yeah, and that's why Ibn Qudama, when he wrote the book called Al-Mughni, his discussion of Al-Mughni was in reference to Al-Khiraqi's book.
Yeah.
Mughni itself is a massive book that I'm sure you haven't read. There's no way you've read it.
I haven't read
and by the way, you can never read that book. Yeah, because you need to read 3 books before that book. You need to Al-Fiqh, Al-Kafi, Muqna. There's 3 books that come before Al-Mughni. So in other words, for someone like, sorry to say, Yani, because we need to be honest and intellectually honest.
Yeah.
For you to approach Al-Khiraqi, you have to have read 3 books in between, which is at least to get an understanding what's going on.
No, you're trying to make it seem like rocket science. This isn't true, man. Because Khiraqi, because like the Khiraqi, he quotes Ibn Hanbal's opinions. You don't need to know kind of rocket science in order to understand. If Ibn Hanbal says that sea campaigns are superior to land campaigns, that speaks for itself. So you can understand Khiraqi without reading these other books.
No, you can't.
Yeah, maybe not in whole, but certainly you can read parts of it.
It's like a doctor. Let me tell you what it's like. Seriously, sorry to say. No, James, I have to be honest with you. I'll be honest with you. It's like someone who's going into medical school, yeah? And he goes straight to 4th year trying to read the books of the doctors.
It's not like that.
It's exactly
no,
like
it isn't. Because these books, they're accessible. They're not rocket science. I promise you. No, it isn't. It's just a collection of rulings, and it says what the rulings are about.
Bro, I'm telling you.
It transmits Ibn Hanbal's opinions, and if Ibn Hanbal gives his opinion on something,
and is it one opinion?
In general,
no, it's never one opinion. Bro, look at
for jihad.